Good evening. Welcome to PSSL 6240, Political Violence and Terrorism, and welcome to, for most of you, George Washington University's Homeland Security Program and George Washington University as a whole. I'm Rohan Sharma, and I will be your instructor for the first course in the sequence, Political Violence and Terrorism. I look forward to this course, and I look forward to having you all in my course, and I hope this class, as well as this program as a whole, both fulfills your academic and intellectual needs. So, welcome to the course, welcome to the program. I want to start off with what this course is not. This is not a course on force protection. It is not a course on anti-terrorism. It's not a course on hostage rescue. It's not a course that you might be familiar with what terrorism is associated with if you're taking a course, if you're in the military or in the federal government. This is not that type of course. This course is a course on terrorism as a social and political phenomenon. It explains the terrorism phenomenon from the point of history, policy, politics, psychology, and even a little bit of philosophy in there. We're going to look at these large academic subjects and use them to be applied to the terrorism literature. So again, I want you to get out of the mentality you might have when you're in a course, if you work for the federal government or state government. This is not what it is. This is a very academically rigorous course. So as I'm speaking to you from now, a lot of things have been going on in the world. We just had an election. Whether you voted for the current president-elect or not, terrorism played an issue in this year's election. The rise of ISIS, that has happened. The rise and maybe even the fall of ISIS. There have been numerous attacks in the past years, from San Bernardino to Orlando to Brussels, Belgium to Nice, France. All of these issues that you might see on the news or on cable TV or on the blogs, they will be relevant to this course. And what I'm hoping that this course teaches you is to look beyond what you might see in the current news and look at the larger patterns of terrorism, the larger underpinnings that might not get reported in the 24-hour news cycle, but are still very relevant from a policymaker's and an academic's viewpoint. So again, we're going to look at the terrorism phenomenon very, very holistically, and what goes on in the world outside is very relevant to this course. And I'm sure that will be for this course as well as the program as a whole. So again, I want you to make sure to get in that mindset right from the onset. So what I want to do is go through the syllabus and the course layout. What I want to start off with is just by mentioning that each week there's online lectures that you have to listen to, you have to take notes on. Not only are you going to be tested on these lectures, but the underpinnings, the themes from these lectures are going to be relevant to make sure you just understand the literature of this course. So that's a key thing I want to get a point across. And again, if you're taking a course, if you're coming from the federal government or the military, a lot of lectures are just click through and get to the end. That is not what this course is. It is, you got to take notes, you have to interact with your classmates, and then you'll be taking a final exam and you'll be writing papers as well. So we're going to start off with week 1, which is this week. Terrorism is an existential threat. And we'll ask the question, is terrorism an existential threat? Do we put too much money, resources into solving terrorism or trying to solve terrorism that could be better used in other areas? I'll let you decide, but we're going to try and answer that question, whether it's terrorism, whether it's ISIS, whatever it comes up next. Is it really an existential threat to the United States? Week 2, we're going to cover history, part 1. If you are born if you came of age in 9/11, you might think that Al-Qaeda, ISIS, 9/11 were the beginnings of international terrorism. That is not the case. Terrorism has been occurring probably since mankind was around, and we're going to really start with the last maybe 70, 80 years, World War II time frame on to present. But we're going to start off again with history, and we're going to look at groups that arose again in the 1930s and 1940s. And what you're going to see is that the patterns of international terrorism kind of remain true. What the terrorist groups tactics that they used in the 30s and 40s were replicated by ISIS and by Al-Qaeda and the other groups that we see in the headlines. The adaptation cycle, how they use the media, all of which are the same. The only thing that may have been different is the technology that was used. But again, the terrorists use the technology of their time, just like we see terrorists using the technology of their time right now. So again, we're going to look at history because we're going to look at the patterns that we see throughout the last 50 or 60 years as it pertains to terrorism. Then the next part of week 2, my favorite topic: what is a terrorist? What is not a terrorist? These are issues that are very relevant. This past summer in 2016, we had a debate about whether we can restrict people's constitutional right to own a firearm if they're associated with a terrorist group. You have to define what a terrorist group is before you can do that. Sure, ISIS is a terrorist group, probably not too much debate there, but what about right-wing militia groups? What about environmental groups? What is a terrorist? What are actions that make certain terrorists while others are criminals or freedom fighters? So we're going to go into that in detail, and that's my favorite subject of the entire course. And that's what your paper will be on. So study up on that issue and try and again, think through all those details in as much depth as possible. Then week 3, we're going to talk history part 2, the road to 9/11, how the Middle East was shaped, how Al-Qaeda arose, what were the social and political and economic circumstances that led to not just 9/11, but at least a large swaths of the Arab world celebrating 9/11, if for those of you who remember back then. We're going to look at those details in question. Then we're going to shift a little bit gears into terrorism finance, which, if you've been following the news and you've seen the rise of ISIS, is a very relevant topic on how terrorists acquire money, how they fundraise, how they expend money, and how these relationships, these financial networks are set. Week 4, terrorism adaptation. We'll ask the question why certain terrorist groups flourish, like Hamas and Hezbollah, which have been around for 30 years, while other terrorists decline or are relegated to the dustbin of history. And then the second part will be WMD terrorism, which I think is the only large-scale terrorism attack that can affect our way of life. And we'll look at that issue from different perspectives. Then week 5, we'll look at counterterrorism policy. We'll look at the United States. We'll look at the European Union. We'll look at Israel. And we'll look at Britain. And we'll do analysis of the United States through 2 administrations, now about a 3rd administration. And then we'll look at Great Britain, Israel, what works, what doesn't, what could the U.S. learn. Week 6 will be intelligence and counterterrorism. We'll ask the question why we still have, or was 9/11, what was the intelligence failure related to 9/11, and why, despite billions, trillions, depending on how you count it, and we've spent on counterterrorism, why we still have intelligence failures. Week 7, the American jihadist threat. And that's obviously very relevant as ISIS is on the scene. And then finally, leadership targeting, which is drones, leadership targeting, leadership arrest, and the subsequent effect on terrorist organizations. And then week 8, which will be your final paper and then review for final. So we'll keep week 8 open so you can focus on those 2 subjects. And if there's questions or issues, we'll have an extra week available for that. So I encourage you again to go through your syllabus so you can at least start to look through the reading, start familiarizing yourself with the material. But as a reminder, this is every week. This course might be asynchronous, but it goes week to week to week. So I don't want you to jump ahead weeks in advance. But I don't want you to fall behind either. And in fact, there's a lot of material, and if you fall behind by 1 week, it's going to be hard to catch up. So again, every week there's assignments. You have to do it within that week. Interact with your classmates. So work products. This is what you will do for this class. And it's a little bit unclear in the syllabus, so I want to make sure it's clear in this YouTube. So you are responsible for 2 papers and 1 group presentation. So everyone will be doing 2 papers and 1 group presentation. How it will work is we'll have 3 Adobe Connect sessions, which are online streaming sessions. So during week 3 is when assignment 1 is due. Assignment 1 is definitions of terrorism. I'm going to break you down into groups, and if you're in group 1, you will not be doing a paper, you will be doing a presentation. And you will present during week 3 at the Adobe Connect session. So you'll be doing, your group will get together virtually, you'll put together a presentation, and 1 or 2 of you will brief it at the Adobe Connect session. Everyone else will be writing a paper on that subject. If you are in group 2, during week 5, you will be doing a presentation on WMD terrorism, which is the assignment 2, which is assignment 2. If you are not in group 2, you'll be doing a paper on that subject. If you are in group 3, you will be doing a presentation during the 3rd group Adobe Connect session during week 7. If you are not in that group, you will be doing a paper. So I want to make sure that's kind of clear, because people do papers twice, they do presentations. So if you're doing a presentation for assignment 1, you will not be doing a paper. If you're doing a presentation for assignment 2, you will not be doing a paper that week. Your grade will be the group project. So I want to make sure that's kind of clear as day. And if there's questions on that, let me know, and I will break you into groups on the first day of class. You'll also be responsible for the weekly discussion board. There'll be 1 to 2 questions every week. You will post, and then you will respond to about six times to your fellow classmates. And again, the more you think about these discussion questions, well, let me back up. On the discussion boards, I want you to show me that you've done the reading, that you've read the lecture, or you've listened to the lectures. You even throw in a little bit of your analysis in there. That's what I'm looking for in the discussion boards. I don't want just cop-out questions or something. I want you to really think through the answers based on what you've read and what you've listened to on the lectures. And then there'll be a final exam. Final exam won't be hard. It's not going to be a trick question. If you've been listening to the lectures, taking notes, and you study a reasonable amount of time, you'll do fine. It's not something that I'm trying to trip you up on or trying to ask details at the lowest level. I'm really trying to make sure you understand themes from this the course, and you can apply those themes in a cogent essay. So before I go, about me, I was, until a few months ago, a DTRA Red Team Analyst, Defense Threat Reduction Agency. I currently now work as a Senior Counterterrorism Analyst for the Department of the Army. So I do foreign counterterrorism for the Chief of Staff of the Army, and I've been doing that for the last couple of months. Before that, I was on the DTRA Red Team as a Counterterrorism Analyst, where we looked at Department of Defense critical assets, WMD terrorism issues. We tried to replicate adversaries to try and undermine critical missions of the U.S. government. And that's about all I could say in that respect. I was analyst at TSA, Department of Homeland Security. I worked for Department of Defense, and I was an Army officer for 7 years with deployment experience to Iraq and Afghanistan. So if you're overseas or you're in the Army, I could definitely sympathize with you and understand the perspective that you are going through. So with that being said, if there's questions or issues, please let me know. And I look forward to seeing you all in class this semester.